To keep us on time, our next presenter is Dr. Hutchinson, and he recently relocated to Victoria, British Columbia, where he's working as a consultant medical microbiologist for Vancouver Island Health Authority, and he's the medical director of the Antimicrobial Stewardship program. He's also affiliated with the Island Medical Program of the University of British Columbia. Dr. Hutchinson received his MD from the University of Alberta in 1985. He worked in general practice, after which he returned to both the University of Alberta and Calgary, where he completed a Royal College training in medical microbiology in 1992. He spent 17 years at the Memorial University, where he developed a large interest in clinical epidemiology. His work centers on antibiotic utilization in hospital and the community locally, nationally, and internationally. Dr. Hutchinson is a past chair of the Canadian Committee on Antibiotic Resistance. He's presently the co-chair of the Antimicrobial Stewardship Working Group of the International Society for Chemotherapy, the overarching body that represents 80 different professional societies of the infectious disease and medical microbiology. And we can see what he's up to on infectionnet.org. I have to admit, I think I pulled Dr. Hutchinson's leg a little bit in trying to get him here in terms of trying to find somebody that can really talk to antimicrobial stuff, as we've called it today, coatings, surfaces, and soaps. We don't really have a huge amount of expertise in Canada, and so in talking with him and trying to get him to agree, I even volunteered the VP of our Open Innovation Group, who didn't know this, to help do any research that was going to be necessary, but Dr. Hutchinson did it on his own, and thank you so much for being here today.
When we get all technically squared around, I will tell you some stuff about antimicrobial containing stuff. And as my kind introductor said to you, I did swallow a couple of times when she asked me if I might be interested in presenting at CHICA on this topic. Presenting at CHICA is nothing new for me. A fair number of you in the room probably do remember me presenting in the past, but of late I have been, oh, we are up there. Okay, so I pushed that forward, did I? What did I call this? Antimicrobial stuff. Perfect. All right, so I don't get to see this here then, is that correct? Oh, what's down here? Oh my God, this is a high-tech place. Okay. Anyway, I've done a lot of presenting, and I've done a lot of presenting at CHICA, but I haven't done a lot of presenting on antimicrobial stuff. And of late, I've been a bit of a specialist on antimicrobial stewardship. So I'm going to weasel in a little antimicrobial stewardship stuff because I think it's an important thing for all the infection control community to be thinking about. Anyway, Virox sponsored this, and I think they're paying for my expenses, but I don't know that yet. And I have no relationship whatsoever, and I am going to show you some brand names because they're important to the talk. So you already were told that I have a new job, and I wanted to tell you about my new job because I think it's an important step in the evolution of all of us. Actually, there's just so many more people than when I used to go to CHICA. It's really quite cool that the infection control community grew so much under my watch. I was the young whippersnapper with a lot less, mostly women looking at me. And now I feel like the old grizzled vet, and there's just tons of people, and a lot of them are younger than me, which is very cool. And it's a testament to everybody pushing to get change and a few bad outbreaks and epidemics and stuff. But finally, we did get some attention. Finally, there was attention at the governmental level, and that's what we need now in this whole realm. And in fact, when I stood up at the mic today and said, this is a job for governments, it is a job for governments, right? Don't get me wrong, Dick, I was just blown away by that whole thing, and I just love innovation and venture capital and people trying something that's really, really cool that you can't do when you work in a government institution. I love it, and I've been involved in some things. I'm not anti-industry by any means, but in this game, there is there is necessity for governments, and I'm going to talk about that a bit. But anyway, in the new game that I'm doing, the stewardship issue, I'm actually, as of August, going to be paid to do it. For the first time in 17 years working at this. It's a big step forward, and it's going to be organized under a bigger and growing quality research and safety portfolio, and I think that's real important for everybody to be thinking about because they are all growing for good reasons. What we're talking about today is a good reason for increasing attention to quality, And they do fit together, and it looks like we're making some great synergies of infrastructure. So think about how you're going to get going on antimicrobial stewardship and how you're going to be, oh yes. So this is my new home. I live about 150 meters from here. And I feel like I fell on my feet. You guys have seen the picture of my backyard in Newfoundland, at least some of you had. That was never my backyard in Newfoundland. This is a little bit closer. So when you come to visit me, I'll take you down there with my new dog. All right, so what's the issue? The issue is that antimicrobial substances are being put in stuff. They're being put in tons and tons and tons of stuff. And I actually, when I agreed to do this, well, one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Saskatoon. A lot of you guys don't know, but my real roots are in Saskatoon, at least my father's real roots are in Saskatoon. And I wanted to come and see a couple of the old uncles, and I had a wedding to go to in Edmonton, so it was going to all work out. But then a convocation got in the way, and a this and a that, and I feel like I've been flying for about a week, and I'm only going to be here for a day, so it didn't work out real well. But anyway, I wanted to come to Saskatoon, but I also wanted to, I wanted to learn a little bit more about the issues surrounding all this stuff that's antimicrobial that's going into things, because I didn't know very much. And I'd actually looked. And then I looked a whole lot more, including at about 3 o'clock this morning. It's really hard to find stuff about this stuff. I mean, I'm an internet freak. I know how to get stuff from everywhere. I got all my favorite places, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is an enormous issue, but it's very difficult to edify yourself by just looking at, it's gotten a little bit better than it was a while ago. But anyway, you're going large and increasing scale. So the other big part of the issue is the effects of this are not understood, certainly not by me, and I won't pretend that, but they're not very well understood by anybody, all right? So we're doing something just like when we got going with antibiotics. We thought, open the doors, boys, we'll just kill everything. We won't have any TB, we'll all be out of jobs. There was predictions of all manner of things, right? Use them everything, all the time. And a scant 50, 60 years later, we're, oh my God, we got to pay people that are smart to get us to use antibiotics well. Why? Because we did not use them well. We didn't think it through. We wasted them. We put them in places they shouldn't be. We're still doing it. And this is the same story. This is exactly the same story. Why? Well, because they're good. People make money selling them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where I was standing up today going, that's why we have to have governments. We need governments to look at those big picture things, right? We need governments, and all of us in this room should know we need governments. We need governments to deliver broad services, to make places really good like the one we live in. So this is the kind of thing that we need some regulatory structure on. And I'll come back to that. But anyway, antimicrobial resistance fuels the market for these things. Because we're always talking about superbugs, people are selling things that say that they won't let you get a superbug. And don't kid yourself. The reason that there's an enormous market for antimicrobial containing products is because people are freaked out about them getting something. Their grandma getting something. Their kid, their baby who's just out of the hospital getting something. I worked in infection control for 16 years. I never got asked a single question about how I could maybe not get a microorganism from one person to another. I can't tell you how many questions I got about my grandmother and my sick uncle and my little kid at home and my pregnant wife. That's the nature of things. So when people are fearful, and they are fearful and rightly fearful, they are easy to sell something to. So what's happening at the moment is they're being sold these things. And if they're being sold these things and they can't digest the labeling, et cetera, then we gotta step in. We do it for all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things that we can't allow free-for-alls because it's the big detriment to us all. This is another one of them. And then antimicrobial products may actually fuel the problem of antimicrobial resistance. This is the one everybody's arguing about, and I'm going to present you no evidence because there is no evidence. But I'm freaked out about it. I still am freaked out about it, despite there not being very much evidence. Number one is the precautionary principle, which I'll come back to. Number two, if it ain't doing you any good, I don't want to risk any harm with it. okay? So I think it's the potential for antimicrobial substances going into all these things I'm going to describe to you, actually fueling antimicrobial resistance is a very scary prospect. Right at the moment, we are just entering, I've never said entering before. That was really weird. Anyway, I don't remember what I was going to even say now. We're entering a time that's going to be prolonged that we don't have antibiotics to treat stuff with. Why do I know that? Because there ain't no antibiotics being developed right now. And they take a while to get developed. It'll be 10 years and 15 years, and we're going to have more things we can't treat. So we're going to have to find the way to deal with things, and we're going to have to find the way to use the antimicrobials we have really, really well. That's my kind of new job. And this observation that most of these things that go into these things don't, as far as I can figure out, don't stop anybody from getting any disease. That's not what they do. That's not even what they're supposed to do for the most part, but that's why people are buying them. They have in their heads that use antibacterial things that are labeled and you won't get sick. But that's not what it's about. You've heard all these various other, a lot of people today before me were talking about actually dealing with circumstances where we know there are pathogenic bacteria that we've got to deal with because we know people are getting it, and this is your bread and butter day-to-day story. This isn't what most of what I'm going to talk about is about. And another paradox is that antimicrobial resistance, finally, after singing at the podium for 15 years, antimicrobial resistance is being recognized all over the world, and very latter-day in Canada, as a real and very acute world public health problem, but there is very little regulation of the antimicrobials and stuff. Now that is changing a bit, and I'll talk to that as well. But that's a paradox. Here we have government screaming. Do you know that in the hospital now, if you get accredited this year, you have to have an antimicrobial stewardship program? Accreditation Canada came out with a requirement in January. Now, again, guys like me have been screaming to the rafters, you got to do it. I was kind of, whoa, they already had, that's cool. But now everybody's calling, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to have a program? You got any ideas? Blah, 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 blah. Well, that's what happened in infection control, right? We had to have, how many did we have to have, Laura? You had to have one for 250, and then you had to have one for 150, and at the moment, I'm actually in my head thinking, maybe we can line up that same thing. We need so many clinical pharmacists per bed, and we need so many people that measure antibiotics per bed and stuff. And then we go to the package, just like we did to the province. We need 3.8 million per year over X year kind of thing. So maybe that's a good thought, and I've been pondering that one a lot. Anyway, there's a little regulation of the stuff, and it's certainly not from the antimicrobial resistance generating perspective. All right, so back up a little bit, and what are we actually talking about? We're talking about, in the broad term, and this is the main term that's used in Europe, so you need to know this one, biocides. So a biocide means something that kills something that's living. So something that kills something that's living is a pretty broad term. So pesticides, meaning killing something you don't want that was living, or is living, I guess, at the time, to prevent something bad from happening to you or your environment or an animal or something else. All right? So most of the substances we're talking about, these are chemical substances that are not only antimicrobial, some are, but they're generally, they're biocidal in general. So there's varied effects on living things. In the case of the big one I'm going to talk to, it's got big effects on some aquatic things, right, including bacteria, but other aquatic things that nobody knows exactly what that'll mean in the end. So most substances are not only antimicrobial. So what is it? What is this stuff? And it's actually not nearly as broad as I thought. Well, that's not maybe true. There's a lot of things it's hard to find out a lot about because there's not a lot of requirement to say what's in a lot of these products. However, the big deal is the silver and the triclosan. So the copper, was mentioned by Dr. Syed today, and I don't profess to be a copper expert, but it's more focusing on, I think, the use of copper alloys as covering materials and door handles and et cetera, as its innate antimicrobial. There's worry about that sort of thing as well, how much copper gets in the environment, production, et cetera. It's not without its own, but there is a big marketing push going on from a couple of companies that I've heard from. But the stuff that's going into things is either mostly silver or triclosan, all right? And the other stuff, there's a bunch of others, but I don't know much about it, and I'm still worried. All right, so the silver, these are some of the names you guys might know. I didn't know these, to be honest. So now I feel better. I feel better knowing. No, I don't know if I do. Sanitized, polygene, agene, stereotouch, extracted, and silper, and I pull up Silpure because that's a Canadian one. I didn't know we had a Canadian one. So Silpure is from Thomson Research Associates in Toronto, and it is a silver, it's a industrial means of getting silver preparations into things that make them antibacterial or antimicrobial. And this is from their website, and I only let you read this just to give you an example of what is said when you go looking around about how good things are, benefits, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And you can read and read and read this stuff from various places. A simple-to-use process attaches silver to textile fibers, long-term prevention of odor-causing bacteria, et cetera. They're commonly used for that purpose, right? To stop things from stinking, though there isn't even a whole lot of evidence as far as I can tell. But they're going into anything that might stink when you wear it. They're going, and to make things not deteriorate, as in mildew, fall apart as a cloth, that sort of thing. So that's a purpose that is not about stopping you from getting sick. I think everybody's got to be clear on that. It might be a fine purpose, and I'm not in any way saying that there isn't good purposes for doing this. There is, but you got to weigh them up. You got to weigh them up to how much do we need our clothes not to fall apart so quickly versus dying of antimicrobial resistant organisms. That's the kind of thing we got to deal with, right? All right, so I'm going to focus now predominantly on the triclosan story. I call it a story. I thought I knew the triclosan story, but I didn't know it as well as I thought I did. The triclosan is the big one, and it's the big antimicrobial substance that goes into things, and it's all around you, and it's inside most of you. The vast majority of you in this room will be peeing out that triclosan just after the coffee break. It is 5-chloro-2,2,4-dichlorophenoxyphenol. It's a phenolic compound. And it's relatively easy to produce, I understand. So it's been around a long time, and it's been one of the very predominant things that made early things that were stated to be antibacterial. So many of the antibacterial soaps, for instance, contain triclosan. So it's been around us a long time in lots of products, but way, way more products in the last little while than at the beginning, and I'll talk about them. It turns out that this stuff is really, really easy to put into all kinds of stuff. You can mix it up with anything. You can put it in plastics and acrylics. You can put it into ceramics. You can put it into all manner, cloth, all kinds of cloth. Weird. I was, oh, really? You put it right in? And it goes right in the middle somewhere. I don't understand where it goes, but it's supposed to be right in the middle. And it's not sort of, and then for the most part, people will tell you it doesn't come off, though it does come off. And it's not said to be on the surface. So it's going to be active for the life of whatever it is that's in it, right? Again, these are all, we talked earlier today about label claims. How do I know that that's what happens? And should it happen? Is that a good thing to happen? I don't know. But it's able to be put in a very large number of things. And these are the three labels that I'm sure, you guys talked earlier today that you weren't familiar with labels, right? The green labels? I wasn't. I'm familiar with all three of these. And I bet everybody in the room is familiar with at least two of them. right? These labels are all over the place. And the ultra fresh one on the bottom left there, or the bottom right, sorry. Hey, it's bottom left on here. Yeah, it's pretty, that's funky. So I should be reading backwards. Anyway, an observation. The Ultrafresh is from the same Canadian company. So Ultrafresh is the triclosan product, and Silpure was their silver product. And that actually brought me around to the big companies, including all these three, have a whole bunch of silver ones and a whole bunch of triclosan ones. And they're all listed in different ways, and you can't tell which one's which. It's hard to tell which one's which. And that's a fundamental thing. And they hold on to them being proprietary, because if you mix it up this way, it fits in better here, and et cetera, et cetera. So Sanitized is a big company from Switzerland, I believe. And they have, I'm guessing now, but I always guess, so like 12 or 15 or something, different things that are called Sanitized, HL1 or blah, 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 like that. And it's difficult to tell exactly which they are. Now, Ultrafresh has several, and Microban has a whole bunch. Microban is the big American one. All right, so then those are the things that are going in. And as I said, I'll focus more on triclosan and which stuff has them in it. And this is by far not an exhaustive list, okay? So everybody knows about the soaps and hand washes and dishwashing products and laundry detergents and softeners and deodorants and toothpaste and mouthwashes and cosmetics and shaving creams and acne and hair conditioners. You know why they go into cosmetics? I learned a lot about cosmetics. Some of you remember me talking about ultrasound gels and people getting infected from ultrasound gels. They were getting infected from it because they were using what are referred to as stabilizing agents, parabens in this case, that the organisms that were getting into the ultrasound gel were resistant to. Triclosan is used in a similar way to have extend the shelf life of your mascara or whatever, because it all gets contaminated after you use it once. They have to have stuff in it. This might be a very reasonable use for triclosan, to be fair. I don't know that much about stabilizers to tell you, but it's in stuff. You can look at all the labels. Actually, I don't know if it's as labeled as well as it's said to be. But now, it was in that stuff for a long time. It was in the cosmetics, it was in the shampoos and stuff like that. It was in toothpaste. Anything that says Total, like Colgate Total or something, generally has triclosan in it, said to be good for gingivitis. Again, label claims that I have no idea. But then things shifted. And when they figured out you could put it into so many things, not just triclosan, but silver as well, it started to go into these sorts of things. So many, many kinds of garments you buy at everyday stores have these substances in them. Sportswear, all kinds of underwear, soles, insoles, the shoes themselves. There's several Nike Air runners that are marketed as being antibacterial for the extra premium. And I'm telling you, this is what it's all about, right? You'll pay the extra $20 for the antibacterial Nike Air, and maybe even the Eco Seal or whatever. I'm serious. Don't get me wrong. It's not all bad, but that's what marketing is. Marketing is, in my head, I don't want to get sick from my sneakers. I'll take the antibacterial one. Right? Or maybe I'll get at least one more week out of the kids' runners, right? Because it's stinking me out of the house. But you know, I don't even know the claims on that. I have stinky feet. They don't work for me. Like, I don't know. Does it really work? Does that happen, or do you believe it works? Again, that's the kind of thing that we need to deal with. Socks, mattresses, mattress covers, tons of mattress covers, tons of mattresses, pillows, bedding, towels, rugs, furniture. It's going into lots of furniture. I was surprised. I didn't realize it was going right into furniture, but that's a fairly common thing now. There's furniture being sold for hospital applications as well that are impregnated with antimicrobial substances to, be good and, stop you from getting sick. Curtains, big on the curtain thing, again, to sell to healthcare. Do you get sick from curtains? You guys been ever into that thing? How often do we have to change the curtains if someone has MRSA? I don't know. That's the kind of thing, Dick, that's horrible to even contemplate. Like, And forgive me, I guess you could get sick from the curtains. I don't know. But those sorts of discussions actually is what got me out of infection control. Whoa, I can only have this this is the 30th time I've had this conversation with no resolution. Anyway, yeah, I'm sure you guys go home and you're going to have the new meeting about it. Okay. Building products. This one, well, building product goes into the stuff, like right into the stuff you build the houses out of. So there's actually, I think, a project. I couldn't corroborate this under my tight timeline I put myself under, but I talked to this guy one time who was with I think it was a microban guy. And I think there's a project going on where a whole healthcare institution is being built with microban being impregnated in all of it. Walls, floors, all the touch surfaces, and doing attempting to do a randomized effect study. Wow, cool. Anyway, insulation material, all kinds, knobs and handles, obviously. It goes right into lawn furniture, so you can buy the plastic lawn furnitures impregnated with triclosan. It's in the kitchen, and people have been worried about that because then it might get into the food, and there's some rules about that, but not very much. Cutting boards, lots of them, and it doesn't work, right? It goes into the cutting boards to say, we got antibacterial cutting boards, put your chicken on it, Bob's your uncle. And no. So that's the kind of claim. I'm like, come on, you can't do that to people. You still got to wash your cutting boards, you know. I said maybe a little bleach a bad word around here. I don't know, but whatever. Food boxes, nice salad bowls, plates, sinks. And then it got a bit even more dish brushes, the plastic bags you put your trash in. What do you need them in there for? Refrigerators, freezers, dishwashers, right in the fridges, like right in the material, built in the fridges. Shower hoses, the hose, and that's again, so they don't mildew and stuff. It's in grout. Most grout has some sort of lots of grout has antimicrobial stuff in it. Goes right in the tiles now. Toothbrushes, shower curtains, bath mats, toilet paper, toilet lids. Cat litter got in the bathroom. I don't know. I'd never have my cat litter in the bathroom, I don't think. I don't know. Probably never have a cat, actually. I did have a cat, and I had to leave him in Newfoundland. And I bawled for like 8 hours over a cat. Oh my God. Bawled, and I couldn't get on the plane. And he was 14 and a half years old, and he weighed 24 pounds. Don't remind me. I'm emotional today already. Cleaning supplies, you can't imagine. And then it got weirder even, right? Now we got to put it in pencils, keyboards, mouse pads, mice, the mice themselves. You can buy them with the stuff in it. Calculators, office supplies, stamps. You put them right in the stamp. And then people started to get really kind of antsy when it was going into all this stuff, right? Baby bottles, teddy bears, nursing stuff, chain stations, etc. So it was a story where it didn't seem anybody was that interested. And then the public did increase its pressure. Interest groups increased their pressure. And in particular, Dr. Stuart Levy, who's been alluded to, who was the founder of the Alliance for Prudent Use of Antibiotics, did specific study of triclosan, and he actually defined that its mechanism of action was very, very similar to a drug that we still use to treat TB with, and that the resistance mechanisms were also. So that was evidence that it was really an antibiotic. It was a lot like another antibiotic. So what we had here is the circumstance of maybe we would put it in the environment and then we'd lose a drug to treat something. So he was very active. He did many of the early studies to show that you can make any kind of bug resistant to it in the lab. So give it a little bit of triclosan, they'll get resistant to it. That's a very easy thing to do. And then the CDC did a study, these aren't quite concurrent, but CDC did a study in 2003-04, that's 75% had measurable triclosan in their urine. And those numbers, which don't mean a whole lot to me, are reasonable amounts of triclosan. especially the 461 micrograms per liter, which was the higher end of what they had found. And there's others have been done with slightly higher levels. There's been some Canadian levels done in under 6. These were all above 6 years old. The Canadians did some under 6-year-old ones and found some in them. And so it's clear that people are being exposed to triclosan. So the EU, a little before they found out they were peeing it out, but maybe they did some on their own. The EU was one of the first large bodies to do a review, and it gets quoted a lot. So, and it's actually this statement that gets quoted a lot. So they said at the end of their review that there's no convincing evidence that triclosan poses a risk to humans or the environment by inducing or transmitting antibacterial. Now, I'm not arguing with them, but it's real hard evidence to make, and there isn't a lot of evidence. So I'll be happy to say I buy that it has not had a huge impact yet, and it's et cetera, but it's hard to know what happens when it goes into an enormous amount and it accumulates, right? So anyway, that's a statement by the EU. And then there was an Australian review, might be a little harder for you to read. I've been doing good till now though, haven't I? But I will darken one for you. So the relationship between the use of biocides and the development of clinically relevant resistance should be kept under regular review. I can't agree more. Really hard to do. It's a really, really difficult thing. And so, but why I like this is a newer review, is that everybody has said this is a potential issue. It's on the radar. Excellent. So that's grand. Now, what about Canada? Well, Canada got, and the regulators in Canada got wound up by interest groups as well. And there's a very recent one, and I wish I would have found it slightly earlier, because there was a 60-day comment period that I might have commented on. Came out in March of 2012. And it's a preliminary assessment of a large review process. And in Canada, there were actually 3 bodies that oversee different bits of the regulatory regulation of various things, triclosan included. The Environmental Protection Act of 1999 ramped up the looking at chemicals that had been kind of, before that time, had been grandfathered in, if you will. So there was a relook at a large group of chemicals that was mandated by this act, and they identified some that should have special attention. Not a very big subset, but some. And then going forward, there's a larger set of regulations to deal with them. The Pest Control Product Act is meant to be the part of our law that deals with the stuff in the building materials and impregnated into fibers and in carpets and in et cetera, et cetera. And then the Food and Drugs Act, anything that was deemed to be medicinal or for preservative of personal products like toothpaste and makeup, etc. Right? So, what did they come and say? There's actually a fairly good Q&A on, if anybody wants to get back and read what Canada's doing with triclosan, there's a Q&A on the website. And the government of Canada is proposing in this proposed position that triclosan is safe for human health at the way it's being consumed right now in the toothpaste, et cetera, being in contact with the bedding, et cetera, for the people, but is harmful to the environment because of bioaccumulation and toxic effects on marine biota, especially marine plants, I believe. So this is, I'm sure, being challenged, and there's positions being put forward by people who want triclosan to continue as is stuff. I don't know what the final position will be. I expect it'll be out, it's usually months. Anyway, that's what they said. And the Pest Control Product ad said this, which I find quite interesting, and I wonder if anybody in the room can edify me. You can't read that, just read this piece. No further risk mitigation measures were required at this time, as the current registrant, singular, of triclosan has chosen not to maintain its Canadian registration. I interpret this as meaning it will be voluntarily coming out of stuff, as in impregnated into textiles and all the materials that it's used to stop degradation and mildew and et cetera. But I can't really capiche that, and it didn't line up perfectly in another part of the document. These are what they identified in this document as the products, and it's more than one. So maybe that was a typo to say registrant. It looks to me like there's got to be at least that there are 3 registrants, but there are only 6 things registered with the Pest Control Products Act. It just doesn't seem to fit to me with the bits I've been able to read about different parts of the world, et cetera, that there's only 6 of them. And these are the ones from Thompson, both their, I think one is, no, these are all the triclosan containing ones. And then you see 3 of them from Sanitized, and Ciba-Geigy's original Ergosan, and it's the only one that was identified as a powder. So I sent my daughter on a mission the other day, and I said, go take me a few pictures of stuff, would you? And she sucked at it, I tell you. She was not good at all, and I was very disappointed in her. But it might have gotten me a better Father's Day gift. I don't know. No, I probably didn't. Well, it wouldn't work, would it? That would never work. No, anyway, she wasn't as interested as I was hoped, but I liked this picture. And this picture came from somewhere in Victoria. I don't know where it came from, actually. And this is an insole, and you guys can see the label on it. It says Microban, and I've seen, there's all kinds of labels of Microban on it. You guys, I'm sure, are not unfamiliar with Microban, but it's not on our list here. So how did it get in the insoles and not be, what I'm getting at is, I don't think this is all that tight. I don't think that, I don't. And I mean, to make something tight, you have to have a structure, you have to have inspector, you know, it's not a trivial thing. But anyway, I'm not convinced. So what should we do now? Well, I truly tell you, be careful with this stuff, right? And if you don't know, don't do it. If you don't have to do it, don't. That's what we should always be doing. A lot of the stuff we've been doing doesn't make any sense and never did. A lot of the stuff where people make a lot of money at it certainly doesn't make sense, right? You got to be always careful. And in the game of antimicrobial resistance, we always have to be vigilant now. We really screwed up the first crack at this. Do it again, and we're watching kids die, and my grandkids, and et cetera, et cetera. So I really think we've got to be way, way more careful. And then just hearing and reading about all the other substances, et cetera, et cetera. Just one second. I'm a clever boy, I am. All right. But we're healthcare workers, and we work in a public funded healthcare system. You have a responsibility to be advocates. You got to stand up and go, I don't want this stuff in there. We'd like our regulations changed. We'd love there to be a little more regulatory structure that was paid for by our tax dollars that make this sense of this. That's what we need to do. When we're doing our infection control thing, what products are we going to have? Well, let's make our own evidence that we can't get it, or at least do our very best job. Let's get this stuff out. I mean, I remember the time we got the antimicrobial soap out of the hospitals, right? Oh, we put it back into ICU. We got talked into that one, but you know, it was everywhere for a while, and then we actually looked and said, nah, maybe not a good idea. Well, now it's in everybody's bathroom. It's in all the schools. It's all over the place. So I think we have a responsibility. And the role of government, I threw this one in after this morning. So we've got to do that. And what's happening with our government at the moment is they're dismantling the ability to make science in the name of the government, right? They're firing scientists. They're dismantling Statistics Canada. Well, you don't want good statistics to get in the way of a good ideology, now would you? Right? But that's not what Canada is. That's not what Canada should be. We need to stand up and say, we do things for good reasons. We pay for the creation of the good reasons, and we live with them, right? And that's why I think this one is I'm very concerned about. She already mentioned infection net, and I'm just going to show it to you for 1 second because you guys, it's having an infection control rebirth or renaissance or edition as we speak. It's not going to look quite the same. But there's going to be a section like up the right side that there's going to say infection prevention. And it will have some information there in a couple of months. So you can't remember. It's infectionnet.org, and I do send out the odd thing that you might be interested in. We're going to have to think of some infection control ones now. But you can go and have a look there. And you'll always know what I'm doing. And then this is the only picture that my wife likes to show, because I tell everybody that she lost weight. Nothing like standing beside a 250-foot tall tree. All right, so I will stop there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Hutchinson?
Hi, I just want to say great presentation, and I completely agree with you. For whatever you said, I think this was the best presentation for me since I've been in Canada, because I am completely against, you know, with the antimicrobial resistance, going on. I'm doing a research project on antimicrobial resistance, and we are basically opening the ground for antimicrobial resistance, because I see that my antibiotics is just prescribed for everything. Whether you have a cold or you have a ache in your toe, the doctors prescribe it, and I feel that we are the people that are responsible for this, and that is why I mentioned earlier on with the antimicrobial cleaning. It's the same thing. It comes down to the same thing. I deal with vendors on a daily basis, and I don't believe in any vendors. I think they are good salesmen, and they're trying to sell a product, right? So normally I just test it myself. And normally in our OT, we use hydrogassing before air sampling. And what I've done is one of them came to sell one of these UV ozone lights. And I tested it after hydrogassing, terminal cleaning, and UV light, and it all had an insignificant amount of growth, which means, I mean, like, for instance, asparagus, it's there in our daily household, right? And if it's in an OT and it's in an insignificant amount of growth, it's not going to be harmful to the patient. Why do we want to go and always, well, technology is good and I'm not against it, but we are just increasing and making it more vulnerable ourselves. And I think really I like you.
Well, no, I like you too, I'll guarantee you. But I've been saying this for a long time, but how weird is it to think that we're going to solve the problem of antimicrobial resistance with antimicrobials? I mean, it's so completely bizarre. And that's exactly the story. We've got to rethink how we use them. And I applaud the new technologies that might be, less bioactive, or have less consequence. But you're right. There's a lot of simple things that we got to get back to.
Thank you for that thought-provoking lecture. It really has carried the message, and I hope it stays with us. But I'd like to point out that in Scandinavia, they're always ahead of us in Canada.
They are.
As you may know, in Denmark, they've already banned the use of triclosan in consumer products. It wasn't an easy battle, but they actually have won it. And I think in the rest of Europe, the same trend is going to prevail. In the United States, there is a move afoot again to get people away from things such as triclosan. The list of what they consider as environmentally safe products does not include triclosan. So I think there is realization already there, but people who are interested in reading about the potential hazards of things such as triclosan should read that book called Slow Death by Rubber Duck. It's a two Canadian authors have written the book, very, very illuminating in terms of what these things can do and how all pervasive things such as triclosan are, and that they do get into the body with potentially long-term harm that they cause, including interfering with our hormonal systems. So thank you very much, and I think this is a message that we really must carry home.
Please do.